Okay, ladies, here is section 2 of chapter 3. We're going to talk about the different types of courts, how the federal courts of appeals is set up, and the major types of federal courts and what their jurisdictions are. Over the years, there have been several judiciary acts that affect how our court system is set up and established. And as you know, there's only one U.S. Supreme Court. However, each state has its own Supreme Court, but there is just one, and we're talking about the federal level here. At the federal level, there is just one U.S. Supreme Court. However, there are also 13 district courts, and those district courts are where the trials are first originally heard, usually before anything goes any further. Once in a while, a trial may start at the U.S. Supreme Court if it's dealing with something of major importance and obviously a high federal issue that needs to be heard at the Supreme Court. Otherwise, they're going to start at those 13 district courts. Beyond the district courts, we know we have those appellate courts that we talked about, and they're called the federal courts of appeal. These are where all the appeals are made. However, we also have some specialized courts, and they do just that. They hear specialized certain types of cases. There are some parts of our government that are set up that are so complex that it would be impossible for a judge, those lawyers dealing with that type of stuff, to know as much as they can, to know what they need to know, to go to just a federal district court. So they have these specialized courts, and that way the people that are involved know the ins and outs of the laws a little bit better. Some of those specialized courts are a tax court, dealing just with taxes, court of international trade, and again, those are going to be strictly at the federal level, but we know that that's a pretty specialized issue, and then also dealing with certain types of claims, one person with another person. Okay, this next slide, we're going to talk about general jurisdiction, and if a court has general jurisdiction, it can hear any kind of case. Okay? They can hear tax cases, they can hear criminal cases, they can hear child custody cases. Okay? They can hear any type of case, any case dealing with all kinds of issues can be heard at these general jurisdiction courts. And then again, with the specialized jurisdiction, they're only going to be able to hear certain types of cases that deal with whatever they're specialized in. And again, that could be those tax courts. They can only hear cases dealing with people and their tax issues. They're not going to hear a criminal case. Somebody murdered somebody at a tax court jurisdiction trial. Okay, federal district courts. These are, again, the lowest level of courts that we have. And again, we're talking about federal. We're not talking about state or even more of your local district. But these are your federal district courts. They are the lowest level. They have general jurisdiction for the most part. It must be a federal issue to be heard at the federal district court, which means it's pertaining something to the Constitution. Somebody feels that one of their civil rights has been violated. Also, we have to have that diversity of citizenship. It could be someone from two different states are said to have diversity of citizenship. If we have diversity of citizenship, then it can also be heard in a federal district court, because then you wouldn't know which state's laws to go by. Or if the amount that you are dealing with is greater than $75,000, if somebody is suing someone and the amount that is in question is more than $75,000, it is going to be heard at the federal level. If something does not meet one of these three, then it will start at the state level or even lower. Okay. Once we have the federal district courts, then we know we have those federal courts of appeals. So if they're not happy with the decision at the federal district court, they can go ahead and try to appeal it. And remember that at the federal courts of appeals, no new evidence is brought in. They strictly review trial transcripts. They look over the appellate briefs, which just are those transcripts from the original trial. And then there's oral arguments of the attorneys to reach a decision on the issues of law only. Remember, this is not trying to determine what was fact, who was lying, which witness was telling the truth, but it's dealing with issues of fact or issues of law only. And then finally, we have that U.S. Supreme Court, and we know that that is the highest court in the land. It can have original jurisdiction. Very, very seldom does it have original jurisdiction, which means the first court to hear it. Most often, it's going to have appellate jurisdiction. Okay, here's just a little diagram of how the federal court system is set up to kind of give you a visual. At the top, we know we have the U.S. Supreme Court. And then below there, we have our courts of appeals. And usually anything that happens at a district court must go through these lower level courts of appeals before it can go to the Supreme Court. However, once in a while, as you can tell, if it's dealing with a big federal issue, it's going to bypass that court of appeals and go straight up to the Supreme Court. These 13 federal courts of appeal, there's actually 12 of them that are circuit courts, which is each responsible then just for a certain geographic area of the United States. The 13th then is dedicated to be a federal circuit, and it has exclusive jurisdiction over a variety of certain issues with specialized jurisdictions, such as if you're talking about you have a problem with the federal government and you're going to sue the federal government, that's going to be heard at this one federal circuit court of appeal. Claims by veterans for compensation, dealing with trademark and patent issues, government contract disputes, and anytime you're talking about international trade, if there's issues with International Trade Commission, that's going to go straight to this one Court of Appeals. So they have kind of a specialized jurisdiction. Otherwise, most commonly, it's going to go to these 12 circuit ones, which are just strictly assigned by geographic area. And so anytime before something goes to these courts of appeals, we have these lower level courts. We know we have our state Supreme Court. However, again, that can bypass those court of appeals and go straight to the U.S. Supreme Court. Underneath those court of appeals, we have our district courts, those specialized courts we talked about, and then anytime you're dealing with federal agencies, which are kind of going to also have that specialized jurisdiction. If you have a problem with a certain agency, the IRS, Veterans Affairs, things like that, you can appeal those decisions. They're not necessarily, they are court in the sense of you're allowed your due process in your own hearings and things like that. And if you don't like their decision, then you can take it straight up to that Court of Appeals. Okay, and that's about all there is for Section 2 of Chapter 3.